Hello. Welcome. So a buddy of mine was curious about my workflow for setting up the comp on this shot, which is the intro to my reel. So today, really the focus is splitting out your AOVs for doing some animation of your lights in Octane, and then using UV passes and cryptomatte to pop a video or any content you want on a screen in post. Now, the advantage of this is that you don't have to render it during your main render pass, and then clean it up, export it out, and realize that you got to change your content. So let me show you right now. What I did to animate the intro is I just animated between these light passes in After Effects, fading them on and off. And that's a very, very powerful tool. All right, so this is your cryptomatte pass, and this is what it looks like when you add it. Every object gets its own unique color for visibility. Now, all of these can be turned into black or white mattes in real time in After Effects, and it's very fast. It used to be slow. Now you can pretty much have, 10, 15 instances of cryptomatte in your scene in After Effects. And here's your UV pass. And so instead of having to track an object in like with Mocha, and you just extract this matte using that cryptomatte and a plugin in After Effects that lets you remap any new source, video or texture, onto any object in your scene. And you can imagine that's powerful. There are some limitations. It's not great for something that's heavily distorted or very fast camera moves and stuff like that, but you can see, all these posters could be replaced easily. It's just a super fast workflow. Then a regular Z depth matte. Let's set up our AOV in the AOV manager. Here's our master scene. So go to your Octane render settings, render AOV groups. I like to use a 16-bit EXR and DWAB compression. Show passes, show beauty. I use a multi-layer file, and I'll show you why. It's just a lot easier to use in post. Click on Render AOV Manager, and we are going to get rid of all of these. Don't hit delete up here, because that's going to delete your preset. So I add a cryptomatte. Number one thing you want to check out on this is here where it says crypto type, material node name. Now, this is obviously corresponds to material node. So if you go and try and select an object in After Effects with this rendered out, you're going to get all the objects with the same material. Maybe that's what you want. Usually, I want an object that I'm clicking on, a specific object. So you have to go to geometry node name. Let's add shadows, diffuse, emission, no environment because you can't see through the walls in this to the HDRI, but that can be handy. Reflections, refractions. There's no transmission or volumes in this, but usually I'll add a volume and a volume mask, which helps separate out the volume from the scene. Volume emission is very good for pyro stuff. Motion vectors can be handy if you have motion blur and post you need to do. I generally just try to bake it into the scene. UV coordinates. There's no options here. Just add it. So now we're going to add our light passes. Here's one. This is sunlight. There's no sun in here, so we're going to do ambient. Then we're going to add... Then I'm going to fast forward this for you. That it was adding them down here to the renderer view as well. I enabled ACE's tone mapping here, left the exposure and the response and everything at defaults more or less. In render settings, we set the color space to ACE's CG. So that means that when we bring it in, we've got to change a couple of things. All right, so we've set that up. I think that's everything in Cinema. Now we're going to jump into After Effects and see how we bring these in. So let's bring in our pass. We make sure that create composition and import as composition. Import. Now this is important. Make sure you click contact sheet because that's super handy. I'm going to show you why. That way you can see all of your passes from a single multi-layer file. We can see that we have all of our passes at a glance, make sure everything came in the way we wanted it. All right, but let's go to assembly. So we kind of have two different comps set up here. We have a full beauty rebuild, okay? And then we also have light passes for each thing in the scene. First thing I do is drag the data passes to the bottom. Post on top. Reflections, refractions, diffuse. I'll put emitters there too. So now I'm going to break that up by making a black solid here, okay? So now we're going to make this add. So you might notice that the colors look kind of messed up. That is because we are in the wrong color space. So we got to go to our source, interpret footage. Actually, wait. Change our project, first of all. 32 bits. Try linear, work in color space. ACES CG. Okay? Linearize. And OCIO color management. Okay. Compositing linear. ACES CG. Display color space. ACES sRGB, because that's what it is. Boom. There we go. And that looks much closer to our render. So that is this stack right here. So I'm going to pre-compose that. Now we're going to look at the other layers. Take all of these, turn off our beauty so that I can show you. And then we're going to add another black solid here. How does this compare to the comp? The only difference you can see, really, is the post-production, it's the post-pass, because I didn't put that in here. So we could come back here and even grab this, copy it, jump back, add that in. So now what we can do is we can start taking lights on and off. See, there's your hero lights on and off. See how those contribute to the stack. There's our TV light. Let's turn off our ambient light overall. This is what it would look like with no HDRI at all. But my problem was all these reflections are gone. And in a dark room, you don't lose your reflections entirely. So say something you could do is jump back into your comp stack, grab your reflections, jump back out, pop it over, right? So now we have, what a difference. Look at the Titanic, for example. Look at the bed frame. So say we just wanted to pick some objects to enhance. So let's start with the mech, okay? So we got to create a matte just for this mech to add the reflections back on. This is where cryptomatte is so cool. So let's come in here. We're going to name this crypto. And all the magic happens in a plugin on this pass. So copy this, jump back, add this, and it's going to be a matte for the reflection. And all you have to do is make sure you click this, has to be selected, and then your cursor turns into, you got to look closely, your cursor turns into a smaller white outlined cursor that is actually the picker for the plugin, okay? And this can be confusing. But now, once you're on the picker for the plugin, you can select any object in your scene, all right? So there, we got the mech. And we're going to turn it into a Luma matte, matte only, right? So now we got just the matte. And you see this is on full res preview. That is pretty fast, all things considered. Used to be unusable. And so in cases like that, I would just pre-render out this matte. And if you're doing a ton of cryptomatte instances, I would still recommend doing it that way. But you can also combine mattes. So if you go back to colors, say we want the TV, you hold shift, and you get a little plus on the crosshair. Shift, shift. Let's add reflections here, and maybe to the scooter here. All right, back to matte only. Now we take our reflection, make it a crypto matte, and we got to invert it too. See? So now once we inverted it, if I turn this off, you can see the difference. That's a big difference, right? Not only that, but we can also tamp it down. Just give a hint of the reflection in the darkness. You can also add levels if you want to boost the contrast here, just to get those glints tighter. And to animate the lights, all you have to do is animate the opacity. Like, say we want everything dark. Say we want this dark. And then to the light to turn on as the camera comes through. You just animate this coming up. Preview for a sec. There we go. See? So now let's look at putting something in that screen. We are going to be using a couple instances of cryptomatte. So let's add 2 of those. For now, we're going to turn off the reflections. We're going to need to composite the screen reflections on top of our screen content. So let's duplicate this. And here's why cryptomatte is so fun. Turn the visibility of that on. And we're going to go back to colors. I just want this screen. And so now this reflection only controls the reflection for that screen. So now we can really pump the reflections on that. Just to exaggerate it so you see what I'm doing. Now we want to sandwich our video content in between these 2 things. Just grab a video of this video itself. This was a rough previs when I was testing out camera angles. Change the color interpretation on this. Aces RGB. Now we're going to bring in our UV coordinate pass. And we're going to sandwich that in between our beauty and our reflections. Now, what happens if I add this effect? So it's FT UV Pass Pro. And we got to set what the texture image is. Oh, we got to bring this video into our comp. I'm going to put it at the top. Turn off the visibility. Name this UV Pass. Set this to the MP4 file. Now, I love this. Honestly, I would render this out as is. So what this is doing, if you can guess, is using every single UV map in the scene and replacing every single texture. So that's disorienting, psychedelic, and fun. I especially like the video playing on the pillows. Now, one gotcha with UV passes sounds like a no-brainer, but your object has to have UVs. So look at how these things are mapped. The things that are stretched in post, the video is stretched in the UVs. Things that don't have good UV mapping, like that chair, are gonna have terrible UV map for UV Pass Pro. You gotta make sure your object has good UVs. So how do we fix this? Your answer is another cryptomatte. So we come in here, we're gonna turn off UV Pass Pro. We are going to look at our cryptomatte. Gotta select the effect, click on the screen. Okay, now it's our screen. We're gonna call it crypto screen. Matte only. Turn that off, and we're going to use that as our matte. And remember, we have to turn it into a Luma matte. This is a new change in After Effects by switching alpha versus Luma here. So now you can see you have your nice UV pass only on the screen there. So then we turn on UV Pass Pro and boom. And you can see that the screen is mapped on here, perfectly tracked, and you can swap out that material in real time without having to go through a 10-hour Octane render. And it holds together pretty well, even extremely close up. So that is how you use UV passes, cryptomatte, and AOV Manager in Octane. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Like and subscribe.